I never had much use for science fiction. Beyond Apollo by Barry Malzberg is one of the weirdest sci-fi books I have ever read. By design, the plot is never quite meant to be understood, but it still speaks through cynical satire. There is an unpalatable over-cleverness specifically meant to communicate Malzberg's frustrations with the industry at the time, and its artificial limitations on science fiction. Now let me fail at summarizing this work of art. On their way to become the first two men to set foot on Venus, yes, you heard me right, our astronaut protagonist, Harry Evans, plays a one-sided guessing game with his sole companion, the captain, who has asked him quite a simple question. Why exactly are we going to Venus? And in a cynical, fourth wall breaking sort of way that is subtle at first, all of Evans' guesses mirror the reader's own educated understanding up to this point of what the story must be about. So each and every time that the reader or Evans feel like they finally have a grasp on the whole picture, it's wadded up and flushed down the drain. And I chose that particular brand of imagery on purpose. You see, there is a scatological theme woven into the prose. So why is Evans even willing to play this guessing game, forever stuck at the first question, all while the captain grows progressively insane? Because Evans is unconditionally obedient. Also, he wants to guess correctly so that his turn can finally begin, and at last he can ask the captain about his sex life. I told you this was weird sci-fi. We could have had a man on the moon in 1958 or maybe 1953 if the value of life had not been misproportioned to that of research. That was a quote from Forrest, a psychologist who interviews Evans throughout the novel. He is also perhaps the one most responsible for the Venus mission. Evans has been a part of the program for several years and bears the wounds of having undergone an ethically questionable training regimen in that time. Just another example of Malzberg's critical perception of the space age. You see, Evans blames the centrifuge and the radiation treatments for his diminishing sexual performance with his wife, Helen. At times he goes into lengthy detail about his inability to climax, but at other times he completely contradicts this and shows that he finishes a little too early, not caring at all about Helen's pleasure in the matter. But from the very first page, it is aggressively hinted that Evans might simply just be a homosexual and in love with the captain instead. Or he is the captain, as the narrative and prose itself is scattered in a contradictive, schizophrenic mosaic. Most of the novel is written in first person, all split into teeny tiny chapters, sometimes two on the same page. But there are also times when we inexplicably jump from first person to third person. And in these moments, we come as close as we ever will to an objective understanding of what this story is about. Until mid-paragraph, Evans' intense psychosis becomes apparent once more, and we realize that anything said before cannot be guaranteed as truth. Evans also visits or hallucinates alternate timelines, or perhaps universes, based on the anagrams of people's names. For example, at one point he comes across a woman named Lena, which is an anagram for Helen. Their first date is spent falling through the skies of Venus together. Up until this point of the book, there has been absolutely no hint as to why a scene like this should take place. It's just sudden fantasy or delusion, or perhaps the fluidity of the novel itself. It goes where it damn well pleases, coloring outside of every line in a beautiful patchwork which makes the lines themselves appear to be the ones out of place. As they fall It's a lizard. I thought it was a scary thing this whole time, but it's a lizard. As they fall together through the Venusian skies, Lena says this to Evans. I don't understand you. I don't understand any of you. You're all the same. All that you want are immediate decisions, easy answers, and there are none. You have to let some things develop, take their time. Like I said, this is a very unique book. It seems to hyper-consciously use its character work as a telegraphed singular entity, and its plotting as a completely separate entity altogether. In that way, the plot sort of becomes a character. And the reason that Malzberg is doing this is because he seems to have a very critical view on science fiction as a whole, feeling trapped in its solitary stars, as opposed to freed in its touted, limitless boundaries. Critics and editors pushed him endlessly to follow guidelines and formulas so that his work would end up being what science fiction is supposed to be. But if the genre is so exploratory and free, then why must an author adhere to such rigid structure? Malzberg refuses to be cookie cutter. So much so that he has used his vast literary genius to construct an elaborate FU in the form of this book. The character, Evans, is also constantly debating about writing a sci-fi novel of the same name as the one which the reader holds in their hands. he rattles off about how it will be 138 pages long and will feature tiny chapters that oftentimes don't even last a page. Look, this is a challenging book to review. How the hell do you summarize something that has so many conflicting plots that somehow come together to form this meta plot that refuses to resolve itself? It all confers more of a message than a story. It's clear that there is genius here, but it is so purposefully scattered, confusing, and, dare I say it, punk, that I can easily imagine less informed readers writing this off as a messy work from an incapable writer. And I gotta say, I think this book does have an increased value after reading so much science fiction, especially hard sci-fi. You see, hard sci-fi tends to have a very rigid structure when at its most bland has some pretty bad character work, illustrating more science than fiction. This book tends to sort of poke fun at that. Along with his over-aggressive use of all these genre cliches, he also makes use of his history writing smut. There are several highly explicit scenes portrayed in this text, and most of them, while graphic, are clearly meant to be humorous to the author himself, as well as to the informed reader, but at the expense and shock of those who have caused the stagnation that Malzberg despised so much. At so many occasions, this book had me laugh uncontrollably and uncomfortably, and then say out loud, "What the fuck was that?" And that is beautiful. Writing, when done well in any genre, should invoke a response. And this certainly invoked a response for me, even though I was very confused throughout the reading of it. 2 weeks ago, I filmed a review for a very popular science fiction novel that I won't name, and I had edited almost the entire thing until I realized, man, this is boring. There's nothing to talk about here. It's not a terrible novel, but what is there to say? And so I deleted it, I erased it, it's gone forever. Just nothing worth saying. No opportunity for passion, all paint by numbers. And science fiction can be so much more than that. So, especially as a writer, I can empathize with Malzberg's frustration with the genre. Even the entire premise of Beyond Apollo is a joke. At this time, 1972, he was well aware that humans would never set foot on Venus, let alone within the next 10 years. He knew damn well the hellscape that is the surface of that planet. He knows how ridiculous it was, and that's specifically why he chose Venus. Starting to see the pattern here? And that doesn't even get into the aliens, the more candid critiques on the space age, or how the captain was jettisoned into the sun after finally revealing the deep dark secret about his sex life. For such a short novel, this thing packs a ton of wild content. One last thing, I'd like to talk about these passages that come about every once in a while that talk about the brief history of the universe, brief history of the solar system, or brief history of the space program. Because from these, I feel we get the most direct communication from Malzberg. The passages speak of the very universe coming into being in the 1900s, because that's when the modern conceptualization of the universe was invented. With that concept, we feel as if we have an understanding, a playground, somewhere to explore. But science is always improved upon, and conceptualizations of reality are overridden constantly. Our perceptions of the universe, of the world, whatever reality is, are constantly replaced with new versions, new firmwares of existence. And this is why Evans states that there have been many solar systems. I can't recommend this book to each and every one of my subscribers because of how purposefully graphic and inconsistent it can be. But if you're looking for something to challenge your expectations of sci-fi and its boundaries, and have an especially dark sense of humor, then it's well worth reading. I certainly look forward to reading more work from Malzberg. I also want to say thank you to Bookpilled, a channel here on YouTube. He's a massive fan of Barry Malzberg, and his passion is what led to me picking up this book. For more on my journey as an author and all things science fiction and fantasy, subscribe to Stellar Reads. The wasps are just now showing up. I'm getting out of here.